Where were you on 9/11?
In Manhattan, Midtown, close to the center of Manhattan.
When you first heard about the planes hitting, what were your first reaction and thoughts?
Well, the first thought was to get out of the city because you didn't know what was going to happen next. We literally thought that maybe more attacks were just going to hit other icons of the city, like the Statue of Liberty or the Empire State Building. We had no idea what was going on. We thought planes were just going to come flying and coming into the city. So it was a scary time. So I was just, as everybody else was trying to get out of the city. And what really changed the entire feel was when the first tower went down. Because obviously it was a very serious situation when the planes hit. But when the towers went down and you knew how many fatalities there were, then it was really hitting home how serious of an attack this was. Well, there was just pandemonium. It was just people making calls and, you know, seeing it on the news and watching it as it was happening, but being so close to it gave you a really eerie feeling. And a lot of people tried to leave through Metro North, but that shut down quick. A lot of people downtown by the attacks, if you remember seeing the news, they all walked over. A lot of those people walked over the Brooklyn Bridge into Brooklyn and had to get out that way because that lower Manhattan area was just a disaster and there was nowhere that you could go. So lower Manhattan had to go exit through Brooklyn. Being in Midtown, there was car services that were leaving town, but if you waited around, then you were stuck. And I got there fairly in enough time that it was crazy, it was emotional, but I obviously made it out of there.
Had you not been in New York City, do you think it would have had impacted your life as great? Yes.
Well, living where we live and knowing New York City, I think the vicinity of it by itself adds a little to it. And seeing those World Trade Centers and being near them and being in them definitely added to it. But more so was being in the city and being so close. That definitely added a whole different element to the attacks.
Were you hesitant to go to New York City after the attacks?
Definitely. Because one thing they did that was incredible, and you could see videos of this after the attacks of the air traffic controllers. You could see all the dots of the planes in the sky, and they slowly pulled out all the planes and had them land, and then the air traffic control screens were blank because all the airplanes were on the ground. But when you look up at the sky, especially in the New York City area with Newark, LaGuardia, Kennedy, the planes, there's always low-flying planes and things, helicopters, and so forth, right over your buildings. And you're always thinking, one way or another, someone could take over this plane and just crash it right into the middle of Manhattan. So yeah, you are fearful, and you are more noticing of things going on around you. Well, you're always thinking, you know, what was going to happen next, and they did it fairly easy if you think about it. The way they got into the planes and took them over and had it all strategized out. And even now they have we have a lot of technology and things at the airports, but you know, any given moment it could happen, and that's what you need to really remind yourself of. Even scarier or as scary as the car bombings that you see in these foreign countries that could easily happen in a place like Manhattan and take many, many lives. So I think it made me and it made other people definitely notice things more. And even now when you see the one tower where they put the Trade Center, where they replaced the Trade Center building, when you see a plane in the background flying near it, it reminds you all the time that something like that can happen.
Did you know what was happening or who was behind these attacks?
We didn't know who was behind it, but you obviously knew that's somebody or some country definitely was, because it was all strategized and it was well thought out. It wasn't something that they thought of overnight. You could tell that a lot of time and effort was put into it, and they had targets that they were looking to hit.
When did you find out who was actually behind it? Like later?
Well, as we were getting more information, you were hearing the name Al Qaeda come up, and then you realized that there were terrorist attacks and there was a group behind them.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors.
When President Bush came on later that night, what did you think about his speech?
Well, it was compassionate for the people that lost their lives, but he also took a strong stance, which I think was really important for the country at the time. Well, seeing the video from him at the school, I think he handled himself well, because if he reacted while that person was talking in his ear, everyone would have known something major was going on. But I think he kept his cool, and then later that night, and even days and weeks after that, I think he handled the situation as best he could.
After the attack, did you look at Muslims differently, or did you, not in your mind, degrade them?
Well, it's difficult not to see them differently or think differently of them, knowing that they're behind it. Just like in any situation, you can't blame the few negatives or the few people that have caused the harm and generalized that entire population for it. But there was definitely some harsh feelings towards that group. And I remember also commuting into work days and weeks after that, and a lot of the Muslim people, the ones that were not associated with the attacks, you could see on their driver's side windows, a lot of them put American flags to sort of say to the people that might have been feeling negative towards them that they were Americans and they weren't in for the attacks, and that they.
Do you have a new respect for firefighters and policemen after their reactions and their bravery shown?
Definitely. Knowing people that survived the attacks and hearing firsthand how they were just running and doing everything they could to get away from those towers, and they still see the people, the firefighters and the policemen running towards it. That right there says so much about those people, how they knew what the danger was, they knew what was going on. That first building, especially after that first building went down, you had figured the second one, the same thing was going to happen, and they didn't shy away from it, and a lot of them lost their lives because of it, and their courage is incredible.